Okay. Well, this right here, I've shown it a few times already. That is the rough first draft for my zombie story that I just have been working on. It's called Fading Death. And I've talked a little bit about it before. I've read the prologue in another video. And I made a promise to myself, and also on here a week ago, I said that I was going to have the final draft finished by the new year. I don't know if you watched the YouTube shorts, but I did it. I finished my book probably around 9:30, 9:20ish at night on New Year's Eve. 270 pages, 88,074 words. And I don't even know if I could get emotional right now talking about it. I might. But when I finished writing it, when I put the last period at the very end of the epilogue, I started crying. I just, it was just such a relief of, not relief, a release of emotions of my old self, if that makes sense. Because it was a decade ago, a little bit over actually, around, I'd say maybe 2014 ish is when I first had the actual concept in my brain of what if I just actually write a book, make a story that I really want to tell. And I had lots of ideas here and there, and I was really interested in completing a sci-fi story that, well, I'll talk about that later on. Um, and 'cause I really wanted to tell a story that I always wanted to experience in this genre. Um, I didn't expect that the first book I would actually write is a zombie story set in the year 2000. And I did. There's, I'd say, four really big influences. I've talked a little bit about them before, but having finished this story, there are four big inspirations that I had to write this story. The first two are video games called Left 4 Dead, and the other one is Project Zomboid. Um, Both of those games approach the zombie apocalypse in their own unique way, and the gameplay itself is their own unique experience. And Left 4 Dead, it's you and three other buddies, so it's four of you in total, just trying to escape and get to somewhere safe, and you're just fighting off of just hordes of zombies and some special infected things like that. And I had a lot of fun playing that in college with my buddies. Um, Another game, well, the other one is called Project Zomboid, which I didn't get into until a few years ago, which is much more like a zombie survivor simulator on the PC. And that one was really fun because you have these moments where you're either running for safety, out of supplies, trying to get somewhere safe, and there's other moments where you're literally just in a safe neighborhood free of zombies, but there's nobody around, no power, no running water, but there's, preserved goods and whatever. And so I really wanted to balance some of these moments that I got to experience in the games into this story, and I feel like I did. I had some moments where the characters are frantic and hectic and going through a lot of emotions, and then other moments where there's calm, there's peace. Um, because I realized that there's a lot of moments in my story where characters are getting emotional. And there's a reason why. When you've been living on survivor mode, when you're not even when okay, so yeah, the story itself takes place a month after the real zombie outbreak broke out, and the characters in it, we find them, we're all introduced to them at a point in their lives where they've been living day by day, literally wondering, how am I going to survive today? And you have people who have lost family, have lost friends, people who had nothing and now they finally have something, ironically, um, a sense of community. And then it just follows these characters in over like a, what is it? I think it's literally 5 days that I spend in the book, just chronicling this epic moment of convergence and escape. But I was able to tell the story that I really wanted to tell, and I think I left enough in there as far as lore and world building to maybe do something else in that setting. If not, I'm totally happy with it being its own standalone. And when it's published and it's out there in the world, people if people like it and they enjoy it, then I'll get feedback from them, get ideas or whatever, and maybe even contribute their own ideas into this setting. So the two other big inspirations that I had for this story, it's also a video game, and HBO just made the show about it. The Last of Us, which I never really played and got into, but I know of it because I really like the way that the zombie outbreak happened, um, and just like how the world looked. Also, the time period, very close and similar. Because I think in the games it's like set in the year 2003, four, something like that, and in the story that I wrote, it's set in the year 2000. So I really like that time to be able to set this zombie apocalypse in. So. Um, that's really the main thing from The Last of Us that really was I guess, a bit of an inspiration for this. But I also like the tone of it. Um, and then there's also a board game called Dead of Winter, which, if you've never played or heard of that game before, it's a board game you can play with friends, and you have to survive every day. You can go out and do some scavenging to find supplies, and you have to do upkeep of the main colony, and everybody has their own objectives that's personal to make. There's also a mechanic that you can have a betrayer in the group who has a secret objective that they won't be able to reveal it until at the end of the game if they succeed and pull it off, or they get caught before it and then they get banished. Anyways, that game, the board game, I had a lot of fun playing that with my friends in college. Also, we would get really into it and like to the point of like doing some light role play and just improvising with rules on the go, just to make the experience more just fun and unique, that we felt like would make logical sense, and we just like tweak the rules a little bit to just make it fit the way that we wanted to play. And it was a lot of fun. And so that's kind of when I had the initial idea for characters in a zombie story that I wrote down. I put them down on the Google Drive a long time ago. Never thought I would actually do anything with it. And then it was a few months ago, back in I'd say maybe August, July, around there, I started just cleaning through everything in my Google Drive to reorganize everything, because you can go back to March of, well, now I could say last year because we're now in 2026. My first video that I put on YouTube before this series on Sunday has arrived. I'm all about figuring out how to change my life to live the way that I've always wanted to live. And this is an essential part of it because I've always wanted to write. And for anybody who isn't sure if it's really something that they want to do, this is what I did. All the different stories, ideas, and book aspirations that I had, I stopped writing completely. I just put it all, left it in the Google Drive. I didn't touch it. I didn't think about it because I wanted to see if it truly was just a phase in my life that I was refusing to let go of. And I did. I just focused on other things, definitely focusing on myself and just the life that I want to live. And I'm really grateful that I took that time, because once I felt like I was at a place to come back and look at all of my work that I've done so far, I took some time and really used my imagination to ask myself, when I'm on my deathbed and I'm old, whatever, Lord willing, if I never wrote these books, would it be a regret for me? Like, would I look back at my life and at that point and say, yeah, I would regret never having written these books. So that's when I knew that I have to finish it. I have to do it. And because I figured out how to actually complete a final draft for the first book, I can do it for all the other ones. So I'm really excited to continue going forward. One of the other books that I'm working on, which I already have a first draft finished for, um, it takes place in a setting that I've been building. I started building it when I was really getting into Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role playing, um, a little bit before and during COVID, especially. I just had this idea of, well, what if I just create my own world and then just kind of go from there? And the book that I'm working on takes place in that setting. A lot of the books actually that I'm going to be working on take place in this setting. I talked a little bit about it, but it's a whole chronicles that follows different important historical moments in this world because I really want to take this from a primordial, primeval, Bronze Age, Stone Age, whatever story and have moments throughout history all the way to science fiction, which I've mentioned sci-fi before as being truly my bread and butter, because science fiction, in a way, just inspires imagination and ideation, and just it's my favorite when it comes to just any kind of fictional storytelling and setting. So there's sci-fi that I really like, sci-fi that I just don't really care for or find interesting. I'm not a big fan of like sci-fi fantasy combinations. Like even though Star Wars is awesome, it's fun. It's a great setting. It's still sci-fi fantasy because there's magic in it and the Force. Warhammer 40k, which I'm a big nerd for. Um, that's sci-fi fantasy. Have mentioned it before, where I should probably do a video where I'm painting my miniatures while I'm doing my video, which I still want to do. I just got to go through my bins and organize it all again, and get my paints ready and everything. Because there was a Death Guard kill team that I was working on, which is all kit bashed using bits of Death Guard and Poxwalkers, some third party miniatures, and Astra Militarum figures. So, anyways, I'll say 40k for another time, because it has its own special place in my heart. But yeah, my final draft for my first book is finished, and I cannot wait to share with you once I've made contact with an editor that I'm going to work with to be able to hand it off to them. And I've talked about it before, and I'll talk about it again because I really want the professional feedback from somebody who has worked with authors before. Ideally, I want to find an editor who has worked in this genre before, like with zombie apocalypse, um, because I would feel more comfortable for that for this story. But it's not exclusive; has to be that. But I would prefer that. And then once that's done, I'll go through and take care of any of the edits. Um, build on their feedback, and whatever the contract is that we have, maybe they'll just kind of do one last look over it or whatever, especially for obvious things like typos, um, little corrections here and there, like if I'm missing a comma or a period, or if I have run-on sentences, like those more technical things is what I really want to have cleaned up and taken care of. That way, I'm not taking a book to publish that has typos or whatever. Um, and I mentioned it last week that I already have the name for the publishing house I'm going to set up, and so I'm going to be working on registering it through the county here where I live at in Riverside County in California. Also buying the domain so that way I can have the foundation for setting up the website for myself, where I'm going to have my books available on, where I'm going to have my own little about me as an author or whatever, maybe announcements, media kits, because I want to be able to meet other authors and just agents and people in the industry. So this is my step towards that journey, and um, it's just been yeah, like I literally cried on New Year's Eve when I finished this book. So um, if you're writing and if you're exactly where I'm at, you've finished the first draft, you finished the final draft maybe, then the next step, look for an editor, because I know even when I finish the final draft and it's only been a few days, I know already that there's things I could think of that's like, oh, maybe I should add this, maybe I should add that, but I don't want to just end up going back into that analysis paralysis mindset. I've told the story that I want, and when I get feedback from an editor, they might suggest, "Hey, I really think you should, maybe build up the relationship with, these characters, or have more interactions with them. Um, maybe, tweak their dialogue way because they speak way too similar to somebody else." So, things like that, I definitely want to take into consideration. And then, once it's done and I can publish it, I'm going to self-publish it. um, I've already got a few ways that I want to do it. Purchasing my own ISBN numbers as well for my publishing house, so that way I have full ownership of the books themselves, and it just makes it easier to go forward with that. And then we just keep on learning and getting better at it. So, cheers to the writers, to the creative minds out there. Your imagination is a great source of the story that you should tell to the world. So I hope you've enjoyed this. So I'm just going to enjoy the rest of my Friday with the cool rain outside, enjoy my glass of wine. And I already did my 96 minutes of exercise this morning. So I'm just going to chill. I've already organized also the other book that I'm working on. That's what I wanted to mention too. I'll probably do it next week because I'm making the map of my world, and I'm using WonderDraft, which is a tool out there that for your own map making, dungeon making, whatever. Well, there's WonderDraft and Dungeon Draft, and I'll probably talk a little bit more about them next week when I could do some screen recordings on my main PC, because that's where I use it. I don't use it on the MacBook, um, but it's really cool. So if you're really into world building, lore, and things like that, then that's going to be one to enjoy. So that's what I'm going to do for next week. And I'm probably going to get started on the initial round of first round edits for my rough draft for my other book. I don't know if I'm going to print it out. I do really like that method of printing it all out and then just kind of going through and handwriting notes. So, I am going to do that now that I think about it, now that I'm saying it out loud, just because I really liked having the notes right in front of me as I was typing out the final draft. And I'll say this too: there are moments in the rough draft that were completely discarded because I found a better way to make them flow in the final draft, um, especially for one of the characters and why they're always wearing a gas mask. So I'm not going to get into too much details or spoilers about it. I'm not going to spoil it. Um, but there's a lot of tweaking that I did and cleaning up, and I felt much better about the final draft and how the story flowed and the logic that it followed over what I had in the rough draft. So, anyways, keep writing. Don't stop. Don't give up. The year just started. I hope that by the end of this year, not only you can have a book published, but I for sure want to have at least 2 or 3 books published before the end of this year. And that's the journey that I'm taking you on. So, cheers.